On April 7, 2003, Air Force Captain Kim Campbell was flying an A-10 Warthog over Baghdad, providing close air support for American ground troops fighting through the city. Enemy fire from the ground found her aircraft. The hits knocked out her hydraulic systems completely. Without hydraulics, an aircraft this size should have been uncontrollable. The flight's surfaces simply wouldn't respond. But the A-10 was built for exactly this moment. Using a manual reversion system, a backup so basic it relies on cables and pulleys rather than hydraulic pressure, Campbell wrestled the crippled aircraft back to base, landed it safely, and walked away. Her call sign that day was Killer Chick. The aircraft she brought home, riddled with holes, became one of the most photographed examples of just how much punishment an A-10 could absorb and still fly. This is the story of the aircraft the Air Force has tried to retire for over 20 years, and the aircraft that ground troops have fought again and again to keep flying.
Another world, sky.
The A-10's origin story begins with a painful lesson for Vietnam. Throughout that war, American ground troops repeatedly found themselves in situations where they desperately needed close air support. Fast, accurate firepower delivered directly onto enemy positions dangerously close to friendly forces. The aircraft available for the job were mostly fast jets, designed primarily for high-speed strikes and air-to-air combat. They could deliver devastating firepower, but they struggled with the specific demands of close air support, flying low and slow enough to accurately identify friend from foe, loitering over the battlefield for extended periods, and surviving sustained ground fire while doing it. In 1966, an aging propeller-driven aircraft called the A-1 Skyraider was pressed into the close air support role in Vietnam, and it performed remarkably well, precisely because it was slow, tough, and could carry an enormous weapons load. But it was also a design from the 1940s, increasingly difficult to maintain and vulnerable in an era of advancing anti-aircraft technology. The Air Force needed something purpose-built. In 1970, the Air Force issued a requirement for the AX program, a dedicated attack aircraft built specifically to destroy tanks and armored vehicles, survive intense ground fire, and support troops directly on the battlefield. Fairchild Republic won the contract in 1973. Their design philosophy was almost the opposite of every other American combat aircraft being developed at the time. Instead of prioritizing speed, stealth, or high-altitude performance, Fairchild's engineers built an aircraft around survivability, firepower, and the ability to operate from rough, forward airfields close to the troops it would support. The result looked unlike anything else in the American arsenal. Slow, angular, seemingly ungainly, and almost immediately nicknamed the Warthog by the pilots who flew it. At the heart of the A-10's design is its cannon, and the cannon, quite literally, came first. The GAU-8 Avenger is a 7-barrel rotary cannon capable of firing nearly 4,000 rounds of 30mm ammunition per minute. Each round is roughly the size of a wine bottle, and many are made with depleted uranium cores specifically engineered to penetrate tank armor. The gun is so large and so powerful that its recoil, if fired continuously, can measurably slow the aircraft in flight. Fairchild's engineers built the entire fuselage around the cannon's mounting requirements, an unusual approach that gave the aircraft its distinctive, blunt-nosed shape. But firepower alone wasn't the point. Survivability was equally central to the design. The pilot sits inside what crews call the titanium bathtub, a bulletproof enclosure of titanium armor plating up to 1.5 inches thick, surrounding the cockpit on all sides. It's designed to withstand direct hits from armor-piercing rounds up to 23mm. Exactly the kind of ground fire the aircraft was expected to face while flying low over contested battlefields. The aircraft systems were built with redundancy as a core principle rather than an afterthought. 2 engines, positioned high on the fuselage to reduce vulnerability to ground fire and minimize the risk of ingesting debris during low-altitude flying. Duplicate flight control systems, a structure engineered to keep flying even with significant portions of a wing or tail section destroyed. Perhaps most remarkably, the aircraft's manual reversion system, the same system Captain Campbell relied on over Baghdad, allows the pilot to control the aircraft using cables and mechanical linkages alone, with no hydraulic assistance whatsoever, if the primary systems are knocked out entirely. No other American combat aircraft was built with this singular focus on bringing the pilot home under fire. Before we continue, let's take a closer look at the aircraft at the center of this story. The Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II, universally known by its nickname, the Warthog. Role: close air support. Built for one purpose above all others, flying low and slow enough to support troops on the ground, and surviving the punishment that mission demands. Wingspan: 57 feet. Length: 53 feet. A straight wing design, built for stability and control at low speed rather than raw velocity. Engines: 2 General Electric TF-34 turbofans, mounted high on the fuselage, positioned there specifically to reduce the risk of foreign object damage during low-altitude operations and to shield the engines from ground fire. Maximum speed: 420 miles per hour, slow by fighter jet standards, and deliberately so. Primary weapon: the Gu-8 Avenger, a 7-barrel rotary cannon firing 30mm armor-piercing rounds at up to 3,900 rounds per minute. The cannon is so large, engineers have joked that the aircraft was built around it, rather than the other way around. Survivability: the cockpit is enclosed in a titanium armor bathtub, up to 1.5 inches thick, designed to protect the pilot from small arms fire and shrapnel. Critical systems are duplicated and separated, so damage to one does not disable the aircraft entirely. In service since 1977, still flying combat missions today. Now, let's get back to our story. The A-10 entered service in 1977, and for over a decade, it served during a war that never came, patrolling the border between West Germany and the Warsaw Pact, prepared to blunt a Soviet tank invasion that history, thankfully, never required it to fight. Its first major combat test came in 1991 during the Gulf War. The results were staggering. A-10S flew thousands of sorties against Iraqi armor, destroying an estimated 900 tanks, along with more than 2,000 other military vehicles and hundreds of artillery pieces. Iraqi troops reportedly nicknamed the aircraft the Iraqi tank Plinker, and its distinctive silhouette became something ground troops learned to associate with rescue rather than dread. The aircraft's survivability proved just as impressive as its firepower. Multiple A-10S returned from Gulf War missions having absorbed extensive battle damage. Engines destroyed, sections of wing or tail shredded by anti-aircraft fire, and landed safely regardless. In the decades that followed, the A-10 flew close air support missions over Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq again during the post-2003 conflict. In each theater, the same pattern repeated: ground troops requesting the Warthog by name, citing its accuracy, its ability to loiter over a battlefield for extended periods, and its reassuring, distinctive gun sound, a deep, buzzing roar that troops on the ground came to recognize immediately as help arriving. Surveys of ground forces who served in these conflicts consistently ranked the A-10 among the most trusted and requested close air support platforms in the American arsenal, a reputation built not on speed or stealth, but on showing up, staying on station, and surviving whatever the battlefield threw back at it. Despite, or perhaps because of, its battlefield reputation, the A-10 has faced repeated attempts at retirement almost since the day it proved itself in combat. Air Force leadership has, at various points over the past 3 decades, proposed retiring the Warthog fleet in favor of newer, faster, more expensive multi-role aircraft, arguing that a dedicated, single-purpose close air support jet no longer fit the Air Force's broader strategic priorities, particularly as budgets tightened around programs like the F-35. Each time, the proposal met fierce resistance. not primarily from the Air Force itself, but from soldiers and Marines who had relied on the A-10 in combat, and from members of Congress representing districts connected to the aircraft's maintenance and operations. The debate became something of a recurring ritual in Washington. Budget proposals to retire the A-10, followed by public and congressional pushback, followed by the aircraft's survival for another budget cycle. That pattern held for the better part of 2 decades. By the mid-2020s, the Air Force finally began a phased retirement of the A-10 fleet, with plans to complete the drawdown by the end of the decade. Not because the aircraft had failed in its mission, but because newer platforms, including modernized versions of multi-role fighters and increasingly capable drone systems, had finally developed the sensors and precision weapons needed to approximate what the A-10 had always done by simply flying low, slow, and close enough to see the battlefield with the naked eye. Even so, no aircraft that replaces the A-10 inherits its reputation automatically. That reputation was earned one mission at a time, by a design built on a simple, unglamorous premise: come in low, hit hard, and bring the pilot home no matter what the battlefield throws back. The A-10 Warthog was never fast. It was never elegant. In an Air Force built increasingly around speed, stealth, and technological sophistication, it remained for nearly 50 years defiantly simple: a gun, an armored cockpit, and 2 engines built to keep flying no matter what. It was the aircraft ground troops, asked for by name. The aircraft that came home with parts of its wings and tail missing. The aircraft the Air Force tried, repeatedly, to retire, and that survived those attempts for over 2 decades, largely because the people who had actually needed it in combat refused to let it go quietly. Captain Kim Campbell's flight home from Baghdad in 2003, hydraulics gone, flying on cables and mechanical linkages alone, remains one of the clearest demonstrations of what the A-10 was built to do. It brought her home. For nearly 5 decades, that was always the point. If you'd like to support this project, the link is in the description below. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. We'll see you on the next flight.